Recording.
Okay.
Are you teachable? You're who I need to know. Are you reachable? Just how far are you willing to go? Are you humble? Oh, and are you teachable? Can you hear that still small voice in your head, showing us where we're missing the mark? Where we're missing the mark. Like a child, we must trust and obey Him, even if no one is when He built a great ark. No one was teachable. How about you? I need to know. Are you reachable? Just how far are you willing to go? Are you humble? Oh, and are you teachable? Read His word, do all it's best to do. If you want to live forever with Him, live forever with Him. And when you go astray, confess your sin. Even if God will sin, then God will forgive sin. God was teachable. How about you? I need to know. Are you reachable? Just how far are you willing to go? Are you humble? Oh, and are you teachable? For He resists so proud and tough of man. This is look at me, see how great I am. But to this one will He look, the meek and unpretentious man, like grandfather Abraham. For He was teachable. How about you? Y'all need to know. Are you reachable? Just how far are you willing to go? Are you humble? Oh, and are you teachable?
All right. Beautiful song. Seems that it was very clear on that time, so hopefully our viewers will appreciate that. Shalom, everyone. Let me get into the picture right now. I've been kind of just chillaxing today since it's been the Sabbath. Sorry about that, everyone. All right, so this is Brother Doug here. I'm with my sister Shoshana to my left, and we got our brother Dennis and sister Sally below us. We're going to do a study today called Why You Should Be Using the Paleo-Hebrew language, which was Yahuwah's language he spoke to Adam and Hua, commonly known as Eve, versus the modern Babylonian Hebrew, and why it's important to still be using the ancient Paleo-Hebrew language. Okay, so basically for our introduction, we're first going to be going into the first section here, which we have is Daniel actually still spoke the Paleo-Hebrew language when he was in captivity. So, and we're going to be going there first. So I'm going to be taking you guys to Daniel chapter 12. Not 12, my bad about that. Daniel chapter 5, verses 11. We're going to start at and go all the way down to the left to verse 28. So Daniel. See here. Sometimes it's hard to see here. Here we go.
Hard to turn pages that fast, isn't it?
What was that?
It's hard to turn pages that quick.
Yeah, I'll try to slow down for you guys. Daniel chapter 5, and we're going to start at verse 11 and go all the way down, I believe, all the way down to 28. So I'll give you guys a chance to get to Daniel chapter 5. All right. And I will be reading out of the Septuagint here, just for fun. Let's see here. And okay. All right. It says in Daniel chapter 5, verse 11, there is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of Yahuwah, and in the days of your father, watchfulness and understanding were found in him, and King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, made him chief of the enchanters, magicians, Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And let's just kind of keep it in context here. Yes, he made Daniel chief in his kingdom, but no, he was not an enchanter, magician, or a soothsayer. Daniel was keeping the commandments of Yahuwah. He would not be a magician at all, or an enchanter, or a diviner. So just kind of helping people out there with that verse. All right, so verse 12 says, for there is an excellent spirit in him, and sense and understanding in him, interpreting dreams as he does, and answering hard questions, solving difficulties. It is Daniel, and the king gave him the name of Belshazzar, which also, interestingly enough, is the name of this king that is seeking out Daniel right now, Belshazzar. Now then let him be called, and he shall tell you the interpretation of the writing. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king said to Daniel, are you Daniel of the children of the captivity of Judea, or Yahudah, which the king my father brought? I have heard concerning you that the spirit of Yahuwah is in you, and that watchfulness and understanding and excellent wisdom have been found in you. And now the wise men, magician, and soothsayers have come in before me to read the writing and make known to me the interpretation, but they could not tell it. They could not tell it to me. And I have heard concerning you that you are able to make interpretations. Now then, if you shall be able to read the writing and make known to me the interpretation of it, you shall be clothed with purple. There shall be a golden chain upon your neck, and you shall be third ruler in my kingdom. And Daniel said before the king, let your gifts be to yourself, and give the president of the house of your house to another. But I will read the writing, and will make known to you the interpretation of it. O king, the most high Elohim, Yahuwah, gave to your father Nebuchadnezzar a kingdom, and majesty, and honor, and esteem, and the reason of the majesty which he gave to him, all nations, tribes, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew. Basically, he killed who he wanted, whom he smote, and whom he would, he exalted, and whom he would, he abased. Meaning, he reproached who he wanted. So basically, this verse is talking about that Yahuwah gave the kingdom to his dad, Nebuchadnezzar, and that Nebuchadnezzar was given the power to do what he wanted when he wanted, basically, in modern English terms. Verse 20, but when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was emboldened to act proudly, he was deposed from his royal throne, and his honor was taken from him, and he was driven forth from men, and his heart was given him after the nature of wild beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys, and they fed him with the grass of an ox, and his body was bathed with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High Elohim is Yahuwah of the kingdom of men, and will give it to whomever he shall please. And you, accordingly, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart before Yahuwah, knowing not all this, And you have been basically saying to him, you've known all this, but haven't humbled yourself, knowing the error of your dads in his early days. Verse 23, and you have been exalted, you have exalted yourself against Yahuwah Elohim of heaven, and they have brought before you the vessels of his house, and you and your nobles and your mistresses and your concubines have drunk the wine out of them. And you have praised the mighty ones of gold, silver, brass, and iron, wood, and stone, which do not see, which do not hear, and do not know anything. And the Elohim whose hand is your breath, and all your ways have you not esteemed. Therefore, from his presence has been sent forth the knuckle of a hand, and he has ordered the writing, and this is the ordered writing, Maneh Tekal Faraz. This is the interpretation of the sentence. Maneh, Mana, which means Yahuwah has measured your kingdom and finished it. Takal, it has been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Verse 28. Faraz, the kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar commanded, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put the gold chain about his neck and proclaimed concerning him that he was third ruler in the kingdom. So the reason we brought this out, viewers, is because this shows that Daniel was the only one left that could read the writing that Yahuwah put on that wall. Now, obviously, this is referring to the Paleo-Hebrew language, because around that time, historically, most Yahudim were acquainted with a modernized version of the Paleo-Hebrew, because they started getting into almost like a Hellenistic type of thing, where they were converting to the Babylonian ways, and they started adapting the Babylonian language to their own. Even before that, there was a verse I didn't write down before, but I do want to put in here because of the context and the timeline of Daniel. It's Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 27. And it's very interesting the way it reads in the Septuagint. This is just prior to them going to Babylon, mind you. So this is around the same timeline, but this is actually even before they get into the captivity. And it's Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 27. It says, who devise men, this is talking about false prophets, who devise men that men may forget my law by their dreams, which they have told everyone to his neighbor, as their fathers forgot my name in the worship of Baal. So the Septuagint says they forgot Yahuwah's law because of this false prophet's dreams, and that has caused them also not just forgetting his law, but forgetting his name in the worship of Baal. So meaning that they started worshiping Baal even before the captivity. So then when you get into the captivity, and they got these Marduks and Ninurtas and all of that that the Babylonians are worshiping, they're adapting that too. They're probably taking on those false deities, and that's why you get capital Lord as a replacement, because Lord is an English way of saying Baal in the Hebrew. So
I have two more witnesses on that. I have Jeremiah 44:26 and 1 Maccabees 1:49.
Okay. Jeremiah 24:26.
44.
Oh, 44:26. Okay. Which says, all right, so Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 26.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore heed ye the word of Yahuwah, all Yahudim dwelling in the land of Egypt. Behold, I have sworn by my great name, says in the Septuagint, says Yahuwah, my name shall no longer be in the mouth of every Yahudim to say Yahuwah lives in all the land of Egypt. So at this point, Yahuwah doesn't even want them speaking his name at this point, because they've been in apostasy. And I think this is around the time where they actually don't want to be taken to Babylon, so they flee actually to Egypt. and under Sennacherib. And it's very interesting too. I mean, we don't have time to get into it, but Sennacherib, actually, Yahuwah compares him to Satan. in Jeremiah, he says, "You red dragon of the sea, you think you can you think you can keep me away from my people." And so it's a very interesting contrast. He kind of does the same comparison with the king of Tyre in Ezekiel 28. So it's very interesting. But yeah, so around that time, the Yahudim actually, instead of they didn't want to be taken captive, and Yahuwah gave them a choice. He's like, live and be taken captive, and you will come back to the land. Or if you flee to Egypt, you'll just get destroyed. Like, Yahuwah made basically, what is it called? Ultimatum to his people at that point. He's like, all right, you stay here, you'll be taken captive, but you'll live and not die, but you'll die in Egypt if you flee to Egypt. So that was Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 26. And let's also go to the first Maccabees one. What chapter was that again?
I'm trying to find where we were before, and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
We were in Jeremiah somewhere.
44:26.
Jeremiah 23 is where we were. 27.
Yeah, 20.
Okay, First Maccabees 1, verse 49.
Okay, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 49. Now, I know some people don't have this book, so if you guys are not able to, I'm just going to put it on share screen. And if you're not able to see the screen, I guess you can just listen in. I know not everyone has the book of Maccabees, so I understand that. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 49 says, "To the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances." Now, this sounds to me, this can be like a whole basis on a whole nother study. But if this is foreign to you about Yahuwah's laws being changed and the ordinances, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 49, you can link that also up with Daniel 7:23 about the little horn. So, and that's about actual prophecy, that there was going to be a little horn, a king, or someone in authority that would be basically like the false prophet of the end times that would attempt to change times and laws, and even anti-messiahs have done that in history. So just a little history lesson there. But let's actually go forward in this study. So now we're going to touch on, also I wanted to add to the Daniel 5 just really quick. The Masoretic text was not even written until 1,000 years after the Septuagint, which is the Old Testament that Yahushua and his disciples would have had at their fingertips. So technically, you don't even get the Masoretic Hebrew or the Masoretic text written down until after 70 AD. And it's rumored that it was a couple hundred years after the destruction of the second temple, the temple of Herod, at that point. So there's been a long gap between the Paleo and the Masoretic. That was the point I was trying to bring out. And to just disregard the Paleo would be very foolish in our belief. Would be extremely foolish, because that was the Hebrew of the oldest Old Testament we have. And so we're going to show you some things here. Also, the second part of this study is going to deal with messianic prophecies and how the Masoretic text, the problem with the Masoretic text is they hide the messianic prophecy. So first, we're going to go strictly using the Septuagint to show you the difference here. We're going to use Genesis chapter 49, verse 10. I'm going to give everyone here time to get there, because I know you got physical scriptures. It might take them a minute or two to get there. All right, so Genesis chapter 49, verse 10. And I'll just wait for you guys to get there. Okay, so, all right. And it says, "A ruler shall not fail from Yehuda," the person that the tribe Yehuda comes from, "nor a prince from his loins." Notice how it says prince, from his loins until there come things stored up for him. And he is the expectation of nations. Now, if you're a Christian, this should be ringing the bell, ding, 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 who this is talking about right here. If you're not even, it should be like, okay, who's the expectation of nations? Who do people hope for salvation? So, I mean, this is clear what it says. Now, the problem is if you use only the Masoretic text here, you're going to get a little tripped up because it's going to say, until Shiloh comes. Same verse, but they translated very weirdly. It doesn't even make sense. It says, between his feet until Shiloh comes. It makes no sense in my opinion. Shiloh, the Hebrew word Shiloh can also be a place in Jerusalem, just letting you know. So actually, geographically, there's a place called Shiloh, and that's why people get confused when reading the Masoretic text. So that's, the Septuagint is very clear. This is talking about Yahusha in Genesis 49, verse 10. The one other cross-reference I have for the Messianic prophecies, the one other big one is the debate versus maiden versus virgin. And you'll see what I'm going to be talking about in a second. Now, just to give you kind of two witnesses for the Septuagint here, even the King James here says, therefore Yahuwah shall give you a sign, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, I'm not saying King Jimmy's perfect with his translation, but even he realized that that Hebrew word should be translated as virgin and not maiden. Problem is, you have some Masoretic text versions like the Scriptures 1998 saying a alma, a maiden. And that's the problem. With the Masoretic Hebrew, alma can mean maiden, which maiden is, in English, maiden just means a young woman. Literally, the verbatim definition means young woman. Very generic. In the Septuagint, though, same Hebrew word, but difference is this is using the Paleo Hebrew from probably the closest we're going to ever get to the original Old Testament, translated into Greek, from Hebrew to Greek. So it says, therefore Yahuwah himself shall give you a sign, behold, a virgin shall conceive in the womb and shall bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, the reason this is so important is this is one of the prophecies that show you he is the Messiah. This is a proof that Yahusha is the Messiah. Why? He was born of a virgin. And all the time when he was on earth, he was claiming that he and the Father are one. And the word Emmanuel actually means Elohim, the Father, with us. So this is a definite description of what the Messiah was supposed to be. Number one, he was supposed to be Elohim with us in human form. Number two, he was supposed to be born of a virgin. You take away that virgin part, you take away part of that messianic prophecy. And that's the big problem with that. So that's something I wanted to point out, that the Masoretic text, unfortunately, with the vowel points, will have people believe that maiden is supposed to be there instead of virgin. Again, maiden in English doesn't necessarily mean a virgin. So that's the problem with that. And so let's see. Now we're going to go to the third part of our study, which is going to go, we're going to be continuing.
I do have a reference, another reference. It's in Zechariah 6. And let me find it again. Verse 11, where it says, and you shall take the silver and gold, make a crown, and place it on the head of Yahusha, the son of Yatzadak, or Yahutzadak, the Kohen HaKadol, and shall speak to him, saying, thus says Yahuwah of hosts, see the man whose name is the branch, and from his place he shall branch out, and he shall build the Hekel of Yahuwah. It is he who is going to build the Hekel of Yahuwah. It is he who is going to bear the splendor, and he shall sit and rule on his throne. and shall be a Kohen on his throne, and the council of peace shall be between them both.
Yeah, and I want to show something interesting in the Septuagint. Recently, our group found out that Al Shaddai means Elohim Almighty, which is kind of like redundant in the Masoretic text. I find it interesting that that same phrase, Al Shaddai, is translated in this verse, which she just read, Zechariah 6:12. In the Septuagint, you'll see here it says, "Thus says Yahuwah Almighty." So actually, the original Hebrew was probably Yah Shaddai, or Yahuwah Shaddai, because Shaddai means Almighty. So the Masoretic text also has that tradition of replacing Yah with Al, if that makes any sense. So a lot of the times you'll see in translations where it should say at least the prefix of Yahuwah's name, capital Y, capital A, capital H, it will say Al for Elohim instead of Yahuwah. So I think it actually should be, if it was translated correctly, Al Shaddai, where you see in Genesis, it probably should say Yah Shaddai or Yahuwah Shaddai, which means in English Yahuwah Almighty, which the Septuagint has right here in this verse. Yahuwah Almighty, behold the man whose name is the branch. So that's just something I wanted to add real quick. So that's another point against the Masoretic Hebrew, is that they a lot of times will replace Yahuwah's name for Elohim. But also,
guys, for only having that particular text.
Yeah. And so that's something I just wanted to bring up to the viewers, that most likely in actuality it should have been Yahuwah Shaddai.
Yahuwah Almighty.
So, all right. So now let's go to the third portion of our study, which is going to deal with certain words that are mistakenly translated. And this is going to definitely deal with a lot with the word giant and the giants. First, we're going to deal with the Hebrew word gaburim, or, not too sure how it should be pronounced in Paleo, but probably should be gabur. So unfortunately, in the Masoretic, they almost every time they translate this word as mighty man. And I'll show you what I mean here. Genesis chapter 10, verse 8 to 9, right here. So Genesis chapter 10, verse 8 to 9 says, "And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth." Now, the problem with this is, you look it up right here, as you can see I have on the share screen, Gabur, which can be a giant, a man, a mighty man, a tyrant, a warrior, a champion. Many different definitions in the Masoretic Hebrew. Okay, so why is the Masoretic Hebrew then almost every time translating it as mighty man? But if you go into the Septuagint, the authors of the Septuagint knew when it was a giant and when it was a mighty warrior. They knew how to distinguish because of context. Genesis 10:8 in the Septuagint says...
You want to tell them why they knew?
They knew because they knew of the Paleo-Hebrew language. Half of the 70 scribes, which that's where you get the Greek word Septuagint means 70. There were 70 scribes that created the translation. Half of them were actual Yahudim from that time period that knew the Paleo-Hebrew language, and then you had the other 50% were Greeks that were checking one another's work. They would go into different rooms, and they would actually scrutinize each other's work to make sure they're being honest with the text. So I trust the Septuagint way over the Masoretic text when dealing with words that have multiple meanings. The same word, but it can mean two different things in English. So I think the Septuagint, they knew for a fact what the context was. They knew the ancient history of Genesis 6. They knew what Gabur could be in certain contexts. It can be a giant and it can be a mighty warrior, depending on the context. Also, they knew Nimrod's history, probably. They knew that he was a giant. So they knew what would be most accurate in that translation. And that's why it says in the Septuagint, Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a giant upon the earth. And then in the next very verse, it says he was a giant hunter, meaning a hunter of giants, before Yahuwah Elohim. Therefore they say, as Nimrod, the giant hunter, before Yahuwah. Now, you'll get a second witness for this actually in the Masoretic text, Genesis chapter 14. I'm just going to do a quick verse here from Genesis 14, verses 5 to verse 6 in Genesis chapter 14. So it says here in Genesis 14, verse 5, and in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings with him to cut to pieces the giants. The Septuagint here says the giants in Ashtaroth and Kamen. And even if you go into the Masoretic text in this verse, it will say, it actually says, let's see here. It says the Rephaim, the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Shaveh Kiriathim. Now, the reason we know this is talking about Nimrod as one of the kings, if you go up to verse 1 in the same chapter, it says, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Ariak, king of Alazar, Chedorlaomer, king of Alam, and Tidal, king of Gentiles. Now this is, we know for a fact Amraphel is the king of Shinar because he found Shinar in Genesis 11. Now we can go there real quick, but just to show people the connection here, Genesis chapter 11 where it says the beginning of his kingdom. All right, so let's see here. Here we go. See here where it doesn't say. I think it's actually Genesis 10. That's right. My bad about that. Genesis 10:10. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Arak, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So right there, tells you right there, he was the founder of Shinar, in the plains of Shinar. So Genesis 14 will give a second witness to the Septuagint that Nimrod was a giant hunter, and that it was supposed to be translated in that particular context as giant, not mighty warrior. So that's just something I wanted to show. Also, Shoshana reminded me for this next portion with Genesis 6, we're going to give you a little bit of secular resource for Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 right now. We have a website called, or not us, but this woman, Melba Ketchum, who found out the truth about the Sasquatch being a giant, and the same type of giant from Genesis 6:4, which was fallen angels with human women. So let me see here. For some reason, my my wireless keyboard's acting up right now, so that's why I had to move. So just really quick before we get cut off on this part, we only get 40-minute sessions, everyone. So just kind of bear with me here. I'm going to put on here, I don't know if you can see here, this is SasquatchGenomeProject.org. And as you can see, this woman, Melba Ketchum,
it's not coming up, Doug. I'm sorry.
All right.
SasquatchGenomeProject.org.
Yeah,
and
right here.
Results. Let me just give her results.
Mm-hmm.
Her results in the DNA testing was that the mitochondrial DNA, if you know what mitochondrial is, it's the female line of the DNA. It is 100% human, but the male DNA was unknown. Exactly what you'd expect to find in a union between human females and the angels who went into them.
So is it showing up now? Because I redid the share like 2 or 3 times. Is it at least on the screen?
Yeah, you got it now.
Okay, good. All right, so you got that there. We got about 3 minutes left. I just want to give them the verse here and the difference in the verse. Unfortunately, the Masoretic text will have the term Nephilim, which has learned a meaning which it does not mean, and I want to make this extremely clear. Do not listen to people that say that that it means the fallen ones. I've looked in you can look in the Strong's Concordance for yourself. I'll be leaving that in the link description. It actually just says giant in the Hebrew, even in the Masoretic Hebrew. But because the Masoretes use the Hebrew term Nephilim instead of what the Greek Septuagint just had gigantes, the Greek term gigantes just meant giant, from the original Paleo Hebrew, which they probably just had the word giant in Hebrew. So that's the problem there with Genesis 6:4. And a lot of translations have it as there were Nephilim in the earth in those days. Not many people would know what that word means. At least in the King James, they knew to put giants in Genesis 6:4, even though they had the Masoretic text, they still understood that it was talking about giants. So it says, now the giants were upon the earth in those days, and after that, when the sons of Yahuwah, now interesting term here, sons of Yahuwah, in the Septuagint actually says angels of Yahuwah. Okay, so they make it extremely literal in the Septuagint translation and in the Paleo Hebrew what it is. These two kinds. You have the angels, the direct creations of Yahuwah, going into the direct descendants of Adam and Hua, to make it plain and simple. That's what was going on. You had his Malachim going into human women to create these giants. So that'll be the end for this portion. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, guys. We will be going with a part 2 very shortly, like Yahuwah willing today. So we'll be like right back. But thank you for joining us. This is Brother Doug with my sister Shoshana. Hopefully this has been an intriguing study for you guys. Hopefully this has encouraged whoever's listening to go into the original Hebrew and to actually want to go to our Father's true name, Yahuwah, and the Son's name, Yahusha, spoken of in Zechariah 6:12, just like Shoshana mentioned. And so we're gonna be coming with a part 2, and the part 2 will include more about the names of the Father and Son. We're gonna go deeper into that. All right, so shalom.
Shalom.